weekly, bi-weekly. It will add up if every person is kind of contributing. Um, of course, we enjoy it. We enjoy it. We spend our time here, and it's beneficial for all of us, right? Um, Secondly, along with that, regarding obviously cleaning, after the breakfast, please try to put your hand in at some place or in some way. Service is the uh, sign of iman, is a sign of iman, is a sign of the khuluq, good character that a person has, right? People gain through khidmah what you cannot gain through many other things. And this is, and you can read about this in many places as well. It is an honor to serve other Muslims and to serve other people, all people. So we should take this as an opportunity, specifically after the breakfast and any cleaning, just to pick up anything as well as the dishes. Inshallah, our topic. We had already started, and an explanation and introduction was already given last week, so I won't go over that again. But we went over chapter 1 of a poem which is written by a scholar of India, Shah Waliullah rahimahullah, who is a known scholar amongst the Arab and the Ajam, and his books are readily available. You can find them, although most of them are either in Arabic or Persian. But yeah, so this is a poem of his which he wrote in Arabic. He translated as well into Persian, and other scholars then translated what was in Arabic and Persian into Urdu or English and other languages. The next chapter goes on to discuss the greater intercession, which is one of the numerous grand qualities and characteristics of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and it's stated in many hadith in Sahih Bukhari and Muslim and other places. The Shafa'ah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is something very important in our deen, and it's that's why you'll find it number one in hadith, many hadith, but also that's why you'll find it that the ulama of our tradition later on spoke about it in the books of Aqidah. And they, I don't remember exactly each one, but I remember in one place that one of the scholars puts 8 types of shafa'ah, 8 types of intercession that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam will give to the people, right? The most, shafa'ati li ahli kaba'ir min ummati, one hadith as well that means that my shafa'ah is for the people who commit great sins. And then there's the shafa'ah that will be stated in this poem as well, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam will make on the mahshar, which is the plane that the people will be gathered on before the hour of judgment will be established. And there are many other forms of shafa'ah as well that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam will partake in the hereafter for different types of people and different types of situations. That is something for us to actually make dua for as well, that we would want to, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam intercedes on our behalf, right? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself will take hadith mention different numbers, but Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself will take a caravan of thousands, some hadith say thousands, 50,000s, the numbers are different, right? But great numbers, and some even would be even more than hundreds of thousands, and much more than that. Some ulama have calculated those ahadith as well, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam will take in those people with him to Jannah without hisab. Right? So we should make dua that we be from those people. We be from, because that's the type of shafa as well, that you're walking with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and you're entering. You're not going to be stopped if you're walking with him. If you're walking with him, you're with him, right? And you're with who you love and who you follow. So if you're with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he's walking towards Jannah and you're walking with him, you're not going to be stopped. Right? So this is different forms of shafa intercession. We must recognize it. It's a part of our deen. It's a part of our belief, as it comes in established ahadith. And our aqaid are established through Quran, but hadith as well. It's important to understand this. How are beliefs established? Not only through, some will say, oh, just Quran. No, it's incorrect. Right? We don't only take our deen from Quran. Right? We take our deen from the hadith as well. And many ahadith establish principles of aqeedah to the degree that Quran will establish it. So this is why it's very important that we recognize what is there in the hadith, and we understand it, and we bring it in our lives, and we believe in it. So the poet starts by saying, again, we'll read the Arabic poetry and we'll translate and explain as well. It says, ملاذ عباد الله ملجأ خوفهم إذا جاء يوم فيه شيب الذوائب. That Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a refuge for many of the slaves of Allah, right? وَمَلْجَأُ خَوْفِهِمْ, and in their intense fear, he is a place that they will go to and they will return to. Now, one thing I'd like to explain is that it should be very clear, the distinction, of course, between Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and his doing and Allah Azza wa Jal. That should be something very clear. Obviously, Allah Azza wa Jal is creator. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is still his created being, although his greatest created being, but his created being. When the poet is mentioning, lines like this, and at the time of the Sahaba as well, similar lines were mentioned, similar types of expressions were mentioned. These are expressions, right? These are not saying that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself alone protects, right? These are expressions that, and these are true. These are true, as the hadith and the further lines of verses will explain, that when people will be fearful on the day of resurrection, what does the hadith say? They will go to the prophets, who will end up, going to Allah Azza wa Jal and making dua, and then the people will be, done away with from that fear that they had, that confusion that they have in the mahshar. And we'll explain that when the line comes. He is this protection, this refuge, this safe haven on a day within which إذا جاء يوم فيه شيب الذوائب, upon which a person who has black hair, that hair will turn white, right? And that is taken from hadith. Rasul Allah Azza wa Jal said, فَكَيْفَ تَتَّقُونَ إِن كَفَرْتُمْ يَوْمًا يَجْعَلُ الْوِلْدَانَ شِيبًا. That how will you protect yourself if you disbelieve on that day that will make children into senior elderly people, right? This is such a beautiful example, ayah, and expression. Why? It takes a whole life to make a person's bones become weak, skin become, fragile, hair change color, and these kind of things, right? It takes a whole life. That one person is young, becomes middle aged, and then becomes an elder and senior. And we see it in front of us, an entire life. What does that entire life consist of that we go through that makes us old, deteriorates our body? And partially the spiritual reason being, you can give biological reasons, but the spiritual reason being that this dunya is tests, right? Anything that is tested, at some time it will wear out, and that's the body. It will wear out in this life. But what about in just a matter of one day, that people will automatically go from being children to white-haired, weak-boned, elderly, right? What must be the stress of that day, right? It takes the stress of a lifetime for us to get to those conditions. What about in the hereafter? Just one day, some time will pass, and people will be brought to that type of condition. And then he mentions, إذا ما أتوا نوحا وموسى وآدما وقد هالهم إبصار تلك الصعائب. That when they will come to Nuh, Musa, and Adam alayhim salatu wasalam, and the fear of that day and what they will see, the difficulties that they will see, إبصار تلك الصعائب, the difficulties that they will be viewing, it will cause extreme fear, right? Extreme fear in their hearts. And what is he talking about? Now, very beautifully, in just lines of poem, he's adding an entire hadith. We know that hadith is that Rasulullah ﷺ told us that on the day of resurrection, when people will be resurrected, right, after what is known as sayha thaniya, that there's one scream which will destroy the entire all of mankind, and the people will die. And then there will be another scream, a second scream later on, which will resurrect people, and people will stand up from their graves and they'll be resurrected. At that moment, there will be extreme confusion for people who don't believe. People who believe and work on their iman and their amal, may Allah protect us, they will understand what's happening. But many people will be in confusion, and even the people of belief, if not in confusion, will be in fear. And we know that because the hadith mentions even the fear of the Anbiya alayhimu salatu wasalam. So people will be in confusion and they will not know what to do. So they will go to Adam alayhi salatu wasalam, they'll say, he's our father, let's go ask him what he can do for us. He will say, I can only worry about myself right now. I cannot even think about my children. Right? And then they will go to Nuh alayhi salam. And the hadith mentions this sequence. And they will go to Nuh alayhi salam. And then they will go to Ibrahim alayhi salam. And then they will go to Isa alayhi salam, or Musa alayhi salam. And they will go to Isa alayhi salam. And they will mention the speciality of each Nabi. And then each Nabi will mention to them that I am unable to, I'm sorry, I have to worry about myself. And they will mention a udhr as well, right? An excuse as well, until they make it to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? And this is they will go through the entire sequence to make their way to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, until when they will go to him, he will say, Ummati, ummati, my people, that will be his concern. Right? And we know this very, statement of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which touches our hearts, that he will say, Ummati, ummati, and then he will go towards, he will go near to Allah Azza wa Jal, and he will go into prostration, and he will make prostration, and then he will make dua, and he says that I will be given words of dua and dhikr that no other mankind at that moment had ever used in the worship of Allah Azza wa Jal. And by that dua, that Alhamani Rabbi, the hadith says, my Lord will give that dua to me, that dhikr to me. And then Allah Azza wa Jal will free people from this confusion and commotion, and then the day of resurrection will start. So this mentions kind of this sequence here, when they will come to Nuh and Musa and Adam. فما كان يغني عنهم عند هذه نبي ولم يظفرهم بالمآرب, that no prophet will ever benefit any of them during those times of difficulty, nor will they assist them with securing their needs. None of them will be able to respond and commit to that responsibility. هناك رسول الله, right? It is there and then that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam ينحو لربه, will turn to his Lord. Right? And Rasulullah, the poet says hunaka here, there, because he's mentioning a specific maqam. This is a maqam, a position of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam that he will be granted. Right? And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam in some narrations of hadith also kind of says it in ana lahu, I was made for this responsibility. I was made for this time. That this time will come, I was made to do this. ينحو لربه شفيعا وفتاحا لباب المواهب. He will turn to his Lord as an intercessor, an opener of the gate of divine gifts. So this will be the means of the opening of many different blessings. فيرجع مسرورا بنيل طلابه أصاب من الرحمن أعلى المراتب. And so the Messenger of Allah will return from his Lord joyful, happy, having secured his demands, his wishes, after Rasulullah had acquired lofty stations, high stations from the Rahman, from Allah. That Rasulullah is being given honor and stations and high stations in this place. What are these, these high ranks that have been given to Rasulullah? One of the commentators, he mentions there can be several that you can outline. Many actually, he says many that probably we cannot count here, so he mentions there's a few of them. That Rasulullah is the leader of Banu Adam, right? And one hadith specifically says in Tirmidhi that Rasulullah said, I am the leader of the children of Adam yawm al-qiyamah. The other hadith don't mention yawm al-qiyamah. This hadith mentions I am the leader of the children of Adam yawm al-qiyamah, on the day of resurrection. And this is a sign of that when no one else will be able to do anything, that's when the leader steps forward, right? So the leader, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, will step forward. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a mercy to all worlds. This appears, right? Dunya is one world. Barzakh, your world, your life in your grave is one world. Then the mahshar is one world. Then yani qiyamus sa'a, when hisab and all of these will take place, that is another realm as well, right? And alameen doesn't necessarily just refer to changing of place, because hashr will take place on earth. It's a piece of earth which hashr will take place on. Resurrection will, hisab will take place here as well. It's not necessarily just place which changes the world. It is the nature of the world, the fact that you'll be seeing things you never saw in this world, the fact that your life in your grave changes. Things that you didn't hear or see in this life, you'll hear and see in your grave. Then your senses will become even more heightened when you're resurrected. You'll see even more things. And then hisab, you'll see even more things. Until you see the most, greatest of realities, which will either be a person's reality in Jannah, and they will see Allah Azza wa Jal, the greatest of realities, or may Allah protect us, the reality of people that will go to Jahannam. The Anbiya alayhimu salatu wasalam, Rasulullah sallallahu maqam, place amongst the prophets, that they're going to all the prophets, but Rasulullah sallallahu is the one that is responding to people. The munajat, which is this, this dua and dhikr between Rasulullah sallallahu and Allah at that moment, that specific dua which will be gifted and given to him, right? So these are some examples. And one of the commentators mentions, it's enough to understand what Rasulullah's position will be in honor at that moment, when Allah will say to Rasulullah, Allah will say to Rasulullah, as the hadith mentions, Ya Muhammad, O Muhammad, irfa ra'sak. When Rasulullah will go into sujood, Allah will say, raise your head. Allah will say, raise your head. Sal tu'ta, ask and you'll be given. Right? Ishfa' tushaffa', intercede and your intercession will be accepted. So this response of Allah Azza wa Jal is enough to explain to us what is that maqam, what is that position that Rasulullah will have on the day of resurrection. So this chapter, which we just completed right now, is that beginning to Rasulullah's maqam, his intercession, and these are all important things that we must know about Rasulullah. The next chapter, he describes a few things. One is the nasab of Rasulullah, which is important. It's very important, right? If you study any book of seerah, the ulama from the beginning, from the first books of seerah to have been written in the first century, right, till now, the ulama generally start with the nasab of Rasulullah. Where was Rasulullah from? What are those qualities that Allah Azza wa Jal bestowed to him, right? Because in hadith, Rasulullah specifies that he was chosen and his nasab was chosen, his lineage was chosen, and exactly who his parents would be were chosen. And each person, one hadith mentions, Rasulullah said, there is no person in my lineage that ever committed sifah, which is adultery. Every person that had a child went through marriage, right? So first the author then goes into the nasab of Rasulullah briefly, and goes into other points which describe his honor. He says, Sulalatu Ismail wa ashrafu baytin, or there's a little difference in the script, but Sulalatu Ismail wal irqu nazi'un wa ashrafu baytin min Lu'ay ibn Ghalibi, that he is from the line, the progeny of Sayyidina Ismail alayhi salam, right? Wal irqu nazi'un, and he's mentioning here that the vein, meaning a person's blood, pulls. What he means by this is that where your from your bloodline, your lineage pulls you to that direction. And this is true. This is true. That a person who's from a certain lineage, right, this is scientifically true. Right? This is scientifically true. You're born with genotypes and qualities which are inherited, right? So inherited traits. But anyways, وَالْعِرْقُ نَازِعٌ, spiritually Rasulullah ﷺ is from this line, so his bloodline is pulling him to that nobility. He will be like Ismail and Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. He will be like those anbiya, those noble people that are in his lineage. So that's about the grander scheme of his lineage. وَأَشْرَفُ بَيْتٍ مِّن لُؤَيْ ibn غَالِبِ. And the great kind of Jad, great grandfather of the Quraysh, Lu'ay ibn Ghalib. He's from the most honorable house of this tribe of Quraysh. As it comes in hadith that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam had said in one hadith that Allah Azza wa Jal had chosen Kinana from the children of Ismail, and he chose Quraysh from Kinana. The tribes become smaller and smaller tribes. So Kinana, this greater tribe, becomes the tribe of Quraysh. And from Quraysh, Allah Azza wa Jal has chosen Banu Hashim, and Allah Azza wa Jal has chosen me from Banu Hashim. Right? And it happens to be actually this week that we're going through these ahadith in the Shifa of Qadi Iyad after Isha and Fajr as well. So, and one hadith we read last night, Rasulullah said that from all of time, Allah Azza wa Jal chose the best time to be my time, right? Meaning the century that I come in is the best century. That qarn, that century is the best century of all time. And so time, Rasulullah says, continues to pass and pass until the allotted time will come that I am to be in. Meaning, Rasulullah is pointing to something. The coming of Rasulullah is a divinely chosen process. It didn't just happen that Rasulullah came from the Arab. It didn't just happen that he came from Quraysh. It didn't just happen that his mother was Amina and his father was Abdullah. It didn't just happen that he happened to be from Mecca. This was all chosen, planned from before time in the eternal planning, azali taqdeer, the eternal planning of Allah Azza wa Jal, that Rasulullah would be chosen and come from this chosen line. So this is very important to understand. And this is why books regarding Rasulullah talk about the lineage of Rasulullah. Other descriptions about him, the poet now goes and he says, بشارة عيسى والذي عنه عبروا بشدة بأس بالضحوك المحارب. That the prophecy or the glad tidings, right, this prophecy of glad tidings which Isa alayhi salatu wasalam gave. We know Allah Azza wa Jal says in the Quran that Isa alayhi salatu wasalam came with a message which affirmed what the Prophet said before him, مصدقا ومبشرا. And Isa ﷺ says about himself that I've come as a person bearing a prophecy of glad tidings, mubashiran, bringing tabshir, right? Of birasulin, of a messenger. His name is Ahmad. His name is Ahmad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So Rasulullah ﷺ is the glad tidings of Isa, and that which the Anbiya spoke about. The Anbiya spoke about the Prophet ﷺ, and there are many reports that mention. But he mentions one in specific description that the Anbiya ﷺ would describe Rasulullah ﷺ, which is dahuk. Dahuk, now linguistically it's dahuk in Arabic. How the Anbiya in the past that did not speak Arabic might have described it, it could have the same meaning though. It could still have the same meaning, which is, one meaning is, its literal meaning, which is a person that smiles a lot. So they knew about Rasulullah ﷺ's character. That's also a given, and there's a hadith that proves that will come in the following lines. Another meaning is the Arab would call someone dahuk based on a darbul mathal, an analogy, that they would give in the past of a person who was so brave that when he would fight, that you wouldn't see worry and stress on him. Right? So Rasulullah ﷺ is the Nabi that brings jihad. This is the Nabi that fights in the path of Allah. He expands Islam, right? And many qualities of Rasulullah's jihad, his struggle in the path of Allah, are specific to him, gifted to him, that were not gifted to the prophets before. Yeah. So they recognize this quality of Rasulullah, his struggle in the path of Allah. ومن أخبروا عنه بأن ليس خلقه بفض وفي الأسواق ليس بصاخب. Or what the prophets had told about him, that his character is not rude mannered, right? He's not rude mannered, very difficult. وفي الأسواق ليس بخاصب. And in the marketplaces, he's not a person who's screaming and raising his voice and fighting, right? Which is a very important quality. We think that this quality of being loud in the marketplace is no longer there, because when we go to the marketplace, people aren't bargaining at your grocery store, they're not arguing. But that's not the case. This quality points to a greater quality, which is a person who's greedy. And this is the quality of, number one, every insan, but more so in people who are doing business and people who are in sales and in the markets and have some place in the markets, aren't just doing a service perhaps, but they're doing business, right? This is a quality, right? What can I do that my voice will be louder than other people? What can I do, right? And so many, may Allah protect us, so many businessmen, what do? They go out of their way to sabotage other people's businesses that are in the same field. We know this, right? This is common. People do this. This is what this means. Not only that Rasulullah didn't raise his voice in the markets, he was different in his mu'amalat. That's what's being pointed at. That when it comes to wealth, Rasulullah was different. He brought a different character. And Sunan al-Darimi, which is a book of hadith, al-Darimi actually, we know that there is 6 books of hadith. Actually, some scholars quantify it in 4 books, some say 5 books, some say 9 books. Right? So a part of the 9-book collection, there's a book called Sunan al-Darimi of al-Darimi rahimahullah, great muhaddith. And in there he mentions that in the Torah and in the scripture of the past, the Anbiya would describe Rasulullah as someone who has good qualities, is kind, soft with the people, and is laysa, as what this describes, that laysa bisakhibin fil aswaq, that he does not raise his voice in the markets. ودعوة إبراهيم عند بنائه بمكة بيتا فيه نيل الرغائب. And the dua of Ibrahim, he is the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam. A Sahih hadith mentions this. Rasulullah sallallahu actually a hadith actually summarizes all of these things as well. Rasulullah said, I am the glad tidings of Isa, and I am the dua of Ibrahim. Right? Ana da'watu Ibrahim. I am the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And the bina'ihi, when he was building the Kaaba, a house within which people gain blessings and gain, we go to Makkah, the house of Allah Azza wa Jal, for many blessings. We go there to make dua. We go there to gain many things. And so Allah Azza wa Jal in the Quran tells us about this. The commentator mentions it here in the ayah as well. That remember when Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam was raising the foundations of the house, and along with him was Ismail alayhi salam. And they made dua, the duas go on until they reached one dua, which is, O our Lord, وَبَعَثْ فِيهِمْ رَسُولًا, that this land, this people, this chosen land of Makkah, which Rasulullah comes from, this chosen land of Makkah, send from amongst them a prophet that will recite the verses of your book and will teach them the book and the hikmah, وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, and purify him, and purify the people. And this is the last kind of verse of this chapter, and then the next chapter goes into his qualities and traits. And perhaps I'll just read a few of the lines and then we'll stop and we'll do it next week. But the qualities of Rasulullah that are first mentioned are his beauty. Generally, the scholars, the ulama, will go into his physical appearance first. Why? Because physical appearance is the first thing that appears. Right? And physical appearance does have an effect. Beauty is a reality. Right? Physical appearance does have an effect, but it's something more. Right? to tell us. You'll find people who will have a beautiful face. You'll find people who will have a beautiful body. You'll find people who will be generous. You'll find people who will be forgiving. You'll find people who will be just. You'll find people who will be brave. But you'll never find a person who has all of those qualities in one. That's Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. That's the point of describing his qualities. That you'll never find a person that has the beauty of the people before him and after him, has the akhlaq of the people before him and after him, all in one person. Right? This is one of the great messages of what we like to take from uh, these qualities. So he says that Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was Jamilul Muhayya Abyadul Wajhi Rib'atun Jalilu Karadisa Azajjul Hawajibi, that his facial appearance, the first thing which appears to you. Right? Muhayya means that which you give tahiyya to. So when you say salam to a person, you don't say salam to their back, right? You see their face and you say salam to them, right? So when you see the face of this person, of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, it's beautiful. Abyadul wajh, the whiteness of his face is apparent. Rib'atun, right? His body was perfect in height, wasn't too tall, wasn't too short. Jalilu Karadis, his bone structure was very grand. It was very, you could see strength in his bone structure. Jalil, it was very grand. You saw strength, and physical strength is a great quality of a man, right? So Jalilu Karadis, Azajjul Hawajib, and his eyelids and the eyebrows, they were very fine. They were not they were not like too less or too much. They were very perfect, very fine. صبيح مليح أدعج العين أشكل فصيح له الإعجام ليس بشائب. Sabih is another description of beautiful, but it comes from what three letters? Subh, which means what? The morning, meaning illuminated, an illuminated and enlightened beauty. Right? There was a nur on the face of Rasulullah, and this is in many ahadith. One hadith by Muslim, Jabir radhiallahu anhu says, I looked at the face of Rasulullah and then I looked at the full moon, the Badr that night, and then I noticed that the face of Rasulullah was more munawwar, more illuminated than the moon. Another hadith, Ibn Abbas says that when Rasulullah would enter a room within which there's a lantern, there's a light, the lantern would become dim because of the light of Rasulullah. Right? What happens if you have candles and then you have the sun? You won't see the candles. Right? You don't see the light which is in the walls when you see Rasulullah. Right? And many ahadith as well, some of them passed in the book that we're reading as well. Ad'ajul ayn, the whiteness of his eyes were extremely white. Ashkalu, and the blackness of his eyes were extremely black, meaning his eyes were very beautiful. You saw his eyes, they popped out, they were very beautiful. Fasihun, he was eloquent, quality of his speech now. Lahul i'jamu laysa bishaibi. The Arab would say, if a person was unable to express himself good in Arabic, so we sometimes we say Ajami refers to a non-Arab, but that's not actually the original meaning of it. Ajami actually refers to someone who cannot express himself good in Arabiya, good, in a very good way, right? Is not eloquent. So then later on, they used it for people who are not Arab, because obviously non-Arabs cannot express themselves in Arabic. So Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, this quality of ajamiya, ujma, that he would not be able to express himself was never, it was never a gap, right? Laysa bi sha'ibi. Sha'ib means, when a person, mixes water with milk, so he takes away the quality of something. So the quality of Rasulullah's speech was never missing due to other, additions or other things which are in it, that would not be a part of it. Rasulullah's speech was very eloquent and he was able to express himself very well. وَأَحْسَنُ خَلْقِ اللَّهِ خُلْقًا وَخِلْقَةً وَأَنْفَعُهُمْ لِلنَّاسِ عِنْدَ النَّوَائِبِ. That he is the most beautiful of Allah's creation in character and in physical appearance. وَأَنْفَعُهُمْ لِلنَّاسِ عِنْدَ النَّوَائِبِ, and the most beneficial of people to the people when calamities befall them. Right? There's a poem in Bukhari, in Sahih al-Bukhari. There's a poem which Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu is the narrator of. And it goes back to the grandfather of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abdul Muttalib. And it is that when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was born, Abdul Muttalib took Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to the Kaaba, and he said, yani, what's being pointed to here regarding his beneficialness. He said that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the exact words of the poem are not in my mind right now, but he said that that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a it will be a safe haven. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam at this point, muhaddithun say, is a few months old, right? Maybe 6 months, a few months old. Abdul Muttalib takes his son to the Kaaba, grandson, to the Kaaba, and he says that he will be a safe haven and a protection for the orphans and the bewidowed. Right? Meaning he will take care of the weak of the community. Right? And he mentions many other qualities as well that are in that poem. So these are very, as you can see, very, very beautiful and important things that we must know and should be in our mind of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The only way we'll appreciate Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the more we learn about him. And learning about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is a never-ending ocean. It never ends. You cannot ever know Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam completely. This is why the poet said that no matter how much, actually one of his verses as well, he says, "In tamdah Rasulullah yawman, فحاذر أن تقصر في الثناء." That if you are going to praise Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam one day, just remember, be careful not to fall short in his praise. Right? Meaning, no matter how much you discuss him, no matter how much you praise him, right, no matter how much you try to unfold his life, his qualities, his lessons, it will never end. So this is why it's important to learn at least some of these basic, very important things we should know. For example, in the first chapter regarding his shafa'ah, which we read today, regarding his shafa'ah, regarding what did the Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam say about him. This is a very important ilm, a very important knowledge. Because the Anbiya alayhi salatu wasalam were flooded with knowledge, had much knowledge about him, and gave many signs about him. This is why at the time of Rasulullah, it was clear when he came. Right? Many signs the people had from the prophets before him. And then now this chapter goes into his physical and spiritual qualities, and we'll continue them inshallah in the coming week. May Allah Azza wa Jal grant us understanding of our Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and the ability to follow him and follow his sunnah. Wa akhir da'wana alhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Subhanallah bihamdihi subhanahu